There's a silent Holocaust happening right now in the Jewish world, and it's not what you might think. It's not Hamas, it's not Hezbollah, it's not Iran, it's not any of the forces outside of us, but there's a force within the Jewish community right now itself that is harming us from within, and that is intermarriage. Jewish people marrying out of the faith. And I wanted to bring in Rabbi Simon Jacobson, the head of the Meaningful Life Center, to shed a little bit of light on this, because there seems to be a lot of confusion. People are converting. What is a kosher conversion? What is not a kosher conversion? At what point can a person convert? At what point can they not convert? What happens when a person gets a conversion and it's not a good conversion, and they have children with their wife that their children think that they're Jewish and they're not? What are we supposed to do as a community? How do we deal with this? How do we prevent this? I have so many questions. Rabbi Simon Jacobson, why don't you shed a little bit of light on this subject for us?
Well, you asked all your questions. Will take quite a few hours to unpack, but let's get to the heart of it. So first of all, let me just share, thank you for having me, and thank you for touching upon a very sensitive but critical topic. And it is not a simple one at all. For me personally, I speak emotionally in pain because, as you're right, if a person begins to intermarry and intermarriage begins to grow, it really reflects on Jewish identity. Because I think where we should begin with, before the problem, why is intermarriage such a big issue? What's wrong with marrying someone from another faith or another background, a Jew and a non-Jew? They're all created by God. Everyone created in the divine image. So why can't two different divine images, whether they're Jewish or not, marry? I think that question is the most important elephant in the room, so to speak. And I find that many people, not only those that intermarry, but many people who are against intermarriage don't even know why. So let me address that as briefly as I can. I think it gets back down to, it's not even about intermarriage and marriage, it's about who we are as human beings and understanding our role in this world. So the classic and most powerful, I would call it spiritual and psychological Jewish understanding of the human being is as follows. God did create indeed every human being in the divine image. That's what it says in the Bible. Adam and Eve, male, female, created them. B'tselem Elokim, divine image. They in turn had children. Those children had children. And here we are, 5,785 years later, according to the Bible, 8 billion people on this planet, all children of Adam and Eve. We all agree on that. So what is this thing called Jewish and not Jewish? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a religious thing? Is it racial? Is it belief systems? So the fact of the matter is, from this perspective, we are essentially spiritual human beings on a physical journey. And each of us has our destiny, has our calling. So just like, for example, everything on earth has been created by God, but there are also species that you just don't mix properly, which means you have to have boundaries. This is not about superior or inferior, it's simply boundaries. Being Jewish or being non-Jewish is not about someone being better or worse. That's big stereotype. It's about being different. For example, in Judaism itself, you have priests, Kohanim, you have Levites, you have Israelites. An Israelite is not supposed to go and serve in the temple. It's not his role. So we have different roles. The idea of a Jew and non-Jew ultimately is two different spiritual paths. And when it comes to marriage, marriage is not just a convenience. It's not just a contract. It's a spiritual journey, a spiritual union. Why, for example, don't brothers marry sisters? It's not just a taboo of incest. It's because it's not the way marriage is meant to be. That's not because those brothers and sisters are not good people. People have their different roles. So the concept of intermarriage really is a result, to be very frank, of ignorance, of years and years of people losing sense of their own spiritual identity. Judaism, for example, rejects and tries to dissuade someone from converting. Mm-hmm. It's the only religion that's that way. Christians and Muslims are always looking for converts. You know why? Because Jews believe very simply, the way you were created, Jew or non-Jew, is exactly what God wants you to be. You don't need to be Jewish to serve God. It's as simple as that. So the idea is this: if we understood our spiritual identities well, then this whole issue wouldn't be an issue. That's why you go back 500 years ago, there was no such thing as intermarriage. because Jews were very clear about their identity. They understood their spiritual destiny, and hopefully non-Jews as well did. Today there's the blurring of these boundaries. So when I meet people who are intermarried, they're beautiful people, but I start talking about what is a soul, what is a soulmate, and they usually don't know much about it. So I see intermarriage as a symptom, not a cause. It's a symptom of ignorance, of lack of understanding what marriage is, what love is, what sexuality is, and what our spiritual destinies are about. That's where it all begins.
I want to put a point out for my listeners, my viewers who are watching this. My perspective on this is a little bit different probably from yours and the rest of the, Orthodox Jewish world. I dated many non-Jewish girls before I became religious. I almost married a girl who is not Jewish. I understand the compelling nature of why somebody would want to do it, especially if you're not connected to your Judaism. And in my mind at the time, I just said to myself, oh, she's not Jewish, I'll just convert her. She'll just convert, and then I'll have no problem. So could you, and that's the predominant thought in many, many people's minds today. Can you shed a little bit of light on some of the issues? Because people think it's very, very simple. Can you tell us about some of the complexities of converting somebody who's not Jewish in order to marry them?
Absolutely. I wanted to first state the issue itself. You have to explain what is the problem. Before I got to what you're addressing. Look,
right.
Just to continue where you just left off, the real challenge is, Jewish man meets non-Jewish woman. Jewish woman meets non-Jewish man. They're attracted to each other. They get emotionally connected. And they'll say, what's wrong? We love each other. What difference does it make whether I was born Jewish or not born Jewish? What difference does it make? And that's where I go back to what I was saying. Well, it comes down to marriage is not just two people who like each other or even love each other. We see how many marriages fail. We see that marriage is much more than just a business contract. There needs to be a deeper soul connection for any marriage to really succeed. This doesn't mean that a Jew and non-Jew cannot have a soul connection, but marriage is more than just a soul connection. It's an intimate soul connection. So there are many issues that can come up. Let's begin just with one basic thing, the education of the children. Let's say one of them is Christian and one is Jewish. Do you send the children to Christian schools or Jewish schools? I've seen the tremendous confusion. So usually they often will say, we'll do both or we'll do one. That's just one small example, but there are many, many other examples. And again, remember, separation does not mean divisiveness. The fact that a brother and sister don't marry each other doesn't mean they don't love each other. It just means their relationship is a different sort than a marriage one. A marriage is a particular relationship that's going to build a family, that's going to build a future. So the conversion process, to address that, which is a whole topic of its own, that's why I wanted to separate it. Well, I'll say the following. I mentioned before, we don't encourage conversion. We don't encourage it. We actually dissuade it. We will tell Jews, rabbis, will tell a non-Jew who wants to convert, why? Why do you want to convert? There's anti-Semitism in the world. Judaism has all kinds of obligations. Live a godly life. Be a good person. Follow the universal 7 Noahide laws that are the foundations of civilization. And indeed, you'll have a place in the world to come. You have a relationship with God. Why would you want to become part of a nation? That's the general approach. If somebody insists, and it's for good reason, I'm not talking about insisting because they want a business deal. Even for marriage is very questionable because it could be an ulterior motive. But for whatever reason, if somebody goes through all these hoops and all these challenges and says, I still want to be Jewish, here's how it works. The rabbis and the Torah tells us that means there's something inside of their soul that seems to be gravitating toward Judaism. So here's the interesting thing, Berel. People don't know this. A convert in Judaism is called a ger shenizgayer. It's not called a goy shenizgayer. It's not a non-Jew converting. It's a stranger, it's called converting. So the way they explain it is that that person, because they have such a strong inclination, why do they want to be Jewish? Means they must have a Jewish soul. And after you challenge them and they still insist, then a process begins, which I'll address a little later. that we are now going to see if that person really does have that Jewish soul, and for whatever reason, we don't know God's mysterious ways, the wires may have been crossed, but there's a halachic process, a legal process. I mean, I'll just compare. For someone to become a citizen of a country, we know it doesn't just happen because you want to become a citizen. You have to prove loyalty. You have to prove a lot of things. In the United States, you know how difficult it is to get a green card? You know, so in Judaism requires obligations. You're ready to commit to Judaism. You're ready to commit to the Jewish people. You're ready to pay a price. And if a person still insists, I want to convert, then we go through that process, and if 3 authoritative halachic rabbis, meaning they're following the Jewish law without cutting corners, determine, then that person is as if they were always Jewish. They're considered like a new person. We don't call them a non-Jew. We call them a Jew that was a Jewish soul that ended up in a non-Jewish body for whatever mysterious reason. The problem, of course, as you can understand, is when conversions become a commercial enterprise. You start cutting corners. You don't really go through this process. I know people who converted simply they paid enough money to someone who converted them. And that person didn't have the credentials, and they think they have a paper that says they're converted, and it's not correct.
So
that would be like
a
forgery, like someone saying I'm a U.S. citizen, and they're not, you know.
In that case, which today in the Jewish world, there's thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of such cases of people who went through a non-kosher conversion, whether that was reform, whether that was conservative, whether that was reconstructionist, whatever that conversion process was. What is our job in relationship to these people? How do we relate to these people? Do we embrace them? Do we shun them? Do we try to bring them to what is our role? What is our job?
Okay, so let's break this down into a few steps. Unfortunately, as I said, there are conversions being done that are called conversions, and they're not conversions. I've dealt with a lot of sad stories.
Give me an example. What does that mean? A conversion that was done that's not a conversion. For the viewers at home, they may not know what that means.
I'll give. I'm using the example of citizenship in a country. So let's say somebody who did not follow the laws of I'm taking American law, United States law, and some lawyer issued you U.S. citizenship, but they didn't fulfill the obligations, and then later someone discovers in the government, hey, this is not a legitimate citizen. So in Judaism, there are requirements. For example, a person has to accept upon themselves the obligations of Judaism, the Torah mitzvahs. What happens if a rabbi, and I say rabbi, not a legitimate rabbi, says, you know what? You don't need to accept the mitzvahs. If you go to synagogue once a year or once a week, that's enough for me. That's not legitimate. So who decides what's legitimate? That's why we have what's called the Code of Jewish Law, called a Shulchan Aruch. It has detailed laws, just like who decides what's kosher food, who decides what's a good matzah, what's considered to be a good deed, what's not a good deed. There are rules for all of this that are all documented, mind you. Anyone can look it up. That require 3 things are required for a convert to be a Jew: to accept the Torah mitzvahs, which are basically the obligations of what it means to be Jewish. 2, they need to be immersed in a mikveh, in a ritual bath. And 3, if it's a male, needs to go through a circumcision. If they're already circumcised, there are methods to deal with that. I'm not going to go into the details. Now, it has to be done by a legitimate rabbi that accepts Torah as a God-given law. If, for example, you find a person who calls themselves a rabbi, but they don't believe in God, so how can you really trust their ability to convert someone to Judaism, which is all based on God and the Torah? Now, I'm not here to point fingers or criticize anyone. Unfortunately, there are many conversions that are being done that are not halachically acceptable conversions. Now, the sad part is the person who's the convert thinks they're Jewish. They think everything is fine. They were told by a rabbi, they even have a document. And they marry, and let's say the woman went through this conversion. A Jew has to have a Jewish mother, or a woman who converted halachically That's the key to Judaism. And let's say the mother was a convert that did not convert that way. She thinks she's Jewish. Her husband thinks she's Jewish. She thinks her children are not Jewish. And you can imagine the tragedy. I recently dealt with a situation where exactly that, the family was innocent. They thought they were Jewish. Their daughter went to Israel, met a nice guy, they got engaged, and the Israeli government is refusing to give them a marriage contract.
Wow.
They say, we need proof of a conversion. They gave them the proof. The Israeli rabbinate says, no, this is not legally acceptable. So it's essentially like somebody's thinking they own a house and they find out that their deed is not correct and they don't own the house.
So what do you do? What does this person do in such a case?
Let's begin with this. It's a nightmare. That's first of all.
Even before the nightmare, I felt that you were dancing around the question a little bit. I know probably
because there's so many parts. I want to go back. So I
want to label it though, because I think it's super important, and you probably don't like labels.
Go ahead.
But I think it's important to label, and if you don't feel comfortable doing it, I will. Is that Reform, conservative, and Reconstructionist conversions are not halakhically acceptable. We don't consider those people as Jewish people. Is that a fair statement or no?
Generally, yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
And an Orthodox conversion is when it's done by Orthodox rabbis and the person doesn't just get a piece of paper saying that they're Jewish, but they actually follow Torah and mitzvahs, meaning they keep Shabbos, they keep kosher, they keep laws of modesty, they keep family purity. They actually are doing it for the right reason, not just to get the piece of paper, to make mom happy at home or dad happy at home so that they can marry a non-Jewish person.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me respond to that. Exactly.
Yes.
So let me say this. I know many Reform, conservative, Reconstructionist rabbis. Some are good friends of mine. Let me tell you what I tell them, because it sounds very offensive if you or I or anyone else or an Orthodox rabbi tells them, hey, you know what? You think you're a rabbi, you're not a rabbi.
I don't mind defending them because that's my that's where I come from. I came from the conservative shul. So I don't mind. I feel like I was lied to my whole life.
But here, Berel, let me tell you my approach. I speak to people like this. They talk to me. And I've had some conversations that were sometimes a little contentious and a little challenging. And they said, so you do not accept me as a rabbi? I said, look, this is not about me. It's not about you. There's a constitution in the United States. I'm using the United States as an example, that everybody has to follow, or else we have a breakdown of law and order. If you asked me, do you believe in freedom of speech? My answer is, it makes no difference what I believe. The Constitution guarantees it, so I have to defend it. Mm-hmm. The Torah has only value. It's only value if it's unchangeable. If anyone can come at any time, whether it's you, me, or anybody, and say, you know what, let's change the standards, it's a breakdown of the law and order. It's not about personal. It's not personal. It's legal. So the fact is, the Torah was given at Sinai several thousand years ago. These are the laws. There are many interpretations of laws. That's a given. There could be even disagreements, but it's all within a context of a Torah methodology. If you, for example, Berel, were a genius, and you suddenly came to the Jewish world and said, you know what, I want to move Shabbat from Saturday to Monday, or Sunday for that matter. It doesn't matter how much logic you have, how smart you are, how brilliant you are. That is the law. It's Shabbos, is the seventh day of the week, is Saturday, and that's that. And the same thing is with other laws. Now there's room for interpretations. If you start tampering with that, I've said this to Reform rabbis, conservative rabbis, and of course they have a different position. They feel it could be changed. That's their response. They say, 1 second, it evolves. People are different today. There was a time where all non-Jews were anti-Semites. I don't know. Today they're more friendly to Jews. I mean, there's all kind. I said, yeah, but the bottom line is we need something that has a certain absolute standard. I'll just tell you the Ben Gurion example I always give. Ben Gurion was the first prime minister of Israel. He was not an observant Jew, but he was a smart man. He said he gave the rabbinate, the control of the rabbinate in Israel, to the Orthodox. Why didn't he give partially to Reform conservative? His response was, interesting, if I make a bar mitzvah and I'm inviting my friends and relatives. Some eat kosher and some don't eat kosher. What kind of caterer am I going to bring? I'm not going to bring a non-kosher caterer because the kosher people can't eat. I'm not going to bring two caterers because non-kosher people eat kosher and kosher people don't eat non-kosher. I bring a kosher caterer, whether I like it or not, that standard will satisfy everyone. So the same thing is the standards that are written in the laws should be the one that's what we follow. It doesn't make a difference what our opinions are or our feelings. And I have to tell you, I have conservative, reform, and reconstructionist rabbis who may not agree with me, but they have told me, you present it that way? I hear your position. Some don't like it, and some are very offended. But that's the position. This is not about Simon Jacobson. It's not about even Orthodox Judaism. It's like I always say, was Moses Orthodox, Reform, or conservative? The answer is there was no Orthodox, Reform, or conservative. There was just the Torah. And these were the standards. Unfortunately, that has been tampered with. And that's where we get to the problem. So, but I want to go back to what do we do? What do we do?
So let's go back to your case there.
Right. What do we do?
This wonderful young lady. She goes to Israel. She goes to get married. They ask for her documentation. Finds out that the conversion of her mother. By the way, I just want to also state this for the record. As I mentioned, who wasn't a kosher conversion? People that convert Orthodox are 100% accepted within the Jewish people. As a matter of fact, we have a mitzvah to accept them with a full, loving heart. You're not allowed to insult them. You're not allowed to question them. You're not allowed to, at all. They're considered 100% Jews in every sense of the word. No questions asked. So I'm equally as extreme on the other end of it. And Judaism, not me, forget about me. Judaism is equally as extreme when it comes to a kosher, good, Orthodox conversion. Judaism is extreme in the acceptance of that family. So this situation in Israel would have never have happened had the conversion been a proper conversion. So back to your case in Israel where the lady was not a proper conversion. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so I would just the only edit I would make to your beautiful last statement would be I would say Orthodox / halachic, because that's really what it means. Halacha means, it's not just Orthodox rabbi. He has to follow the laws as they were written and have never changed over the centuries and millennia.
And be part of a recognized, reputable Beit Din.
Yeah, which is, again, all halacha based. Halacha means essentially the original law as it was written and as is documented and accepted and never been tampered with. Now, so here's real, I'm talking about real life cases that I've dealt with. So what do? The mother and father are frantic. She says, I always thought I was Jewish. Why is anyone telling me I'm not Jewish? It's offensive. I lived as a Jew. We kept Shabbat. We kept kosher. And now you tell me I'm not Jewish and my daughter is not Jewish?
It must be devastating. It must be absolutely devastating.
Of course. And in some cases, they go back to the rabbi that converted them, if he's still alive, and say, what did you do? They say, some people don't accept me as Jewish. And the rabbi, I'm telling you real case studies. Some rabbis say, you know what, I should have told you that I consider it conversion, but there'll be others, which is what a good lawyer would do, right? If I was your lawyer and I told you something, and then I forgot to mention, hey, that some lawyers won't accept this agreement, you want to know that. You want to have an insurance policy that everyone accepts. So I'm not talking now about religious standards. It's just simply, like I said, the Ben Gurion story. You need to know that you go to Israel, this may not be accepted. So number one, they were in a way deceived. Now, that doesn't solve the problem. So according to the guidelines I have heard from my teachers and from halachic experts, in general, even though you don't encourage people to convert, as I mentioned, but in a case like this, what you would try to do in a pleasant way is encourage the woman to go through a halachic conversion. She can do it now. And you encourage the woman, her daughter, to do the same. So we're not looking here to break the marriage, to break up their potential marriage. We're looking to resolve the issue. Now, but you have to do it sensitively, because you don't want to tell them, hey, I'm invalidating you, and so on. Because there's a lot of emotions involved, as you could imagine. The problem I find sometimes is some halachic people, Orthodox, are very harsh. They say, you're not Jewish, I don't want to look at you. No. If the mother and the father lived as Jews, And fine, mistakes were made, terrible. So you try to mitigate it by simply saying, you know what, you had a insurance policy, an A insurance policy, we're going to get you a AAA insurance policy now that will cover everything. You try to couch it in terms that are not personally offensive, not invalidating. That's what a good halachic approach would be to resolve that issue.
If I'm not mistaken, if a person was thought that they were Jewish their whole life, was brought up in a Jewish environment, went to a Jewish school, found out later in life that they weren't considered halachically Jewish according to Jewish law, it's actually easier for them to convert. Is that correct?
Yeah, because of the reasons I said, because the fact that they've already lived Jewishly, especially if they're really committed, for rabbis, that's a big factor. That means you're not talking from scratch. You could trust. If let's say this woman, we're talking about the mother, had a kosher home and kept Shabbat, but conversion was not legitimate or not properly done. So the fact that she's living that way, that means that you know that they are basically observant Jews. Now, if they're not living that way, if they're not living Jewishly and they just have a document, then you have to say that. You can't create a false conversion. You'd have to say, are you ready to embrace the basics of Jewish life? And that's what you would try to encourage them to do. Because look, at the end of the day, if you feel you're Jewish, then why not be Jewish? Do it. And I'll be very straight, I've seen scenarios where this has worked. Literally states where a woman who met a man in Israel, and they ended up getting married, and everything was beautiful. She converted. I'll just tell you something else. I was at a wedding, and I wasn't officiating, but I was involved, where for some crazy reason, someone decided that the mother of the bride, on the day of the wedding, is not Jewish. She didn't look Jewish to him. And he was the one that vouched for her Jewishness. You're supposed to have done research. I come to the wedding. I kid you not. This was like a disaster. And he's saying, I'm not ready to vouch. I said to him, you decided on the day of the wedding? Why didn't you do this research a month ago? What is this? And they decide, you know what they're going to do? They're going to convert her right there and then on the day of the wedding because there's a doubt. They weren't sure. I said, what are you basing on that she's not Jewish? She doesn't look Jewish? Her nose? What are you basing it on? So they went through a convert. Now, to the credit of the bride, as humiliated as she was, and she had to, obviously go into a mikveh, gets rid of your makeup and all your preparations and your hairdo and everything. Sadly, she did it. Because, the guests really didn't know. Everything was delayed by an hour or two, and they did it. I was so embarrassed because I said, I can't understand you. You vouched, and now you decided based on you don't like what she looks like? Anyway, bottom line is, this means that you could have done the same thing much more diplomatically, pleasantly. This left terrible taste. You can imagine what the families felt like. My point is, Berel, there's two things. There's doing it right, and there's doing it the right way. We obviously know there are standards. But I just wanted to emphasize as well, like you said, if you're doing it, let's go the other extreme. Let's do it sweetly, with love, and so on. Obviously, we want to make sure it's accurate and it's halachic, but that doesn't mean it has to be in a way that is hostile. Just wanted to add that into the equation.
I think it's so important, and there's been people in my life, friends, very close friends, that have unfortunately married non-Jewish people, and I could have probably handled it a lot better because some of those relationships are soured today. It's so confusing because, I don't know you don't know what to do about it. Sometimes it's hopeless and there's nothing that you could do. And it's very painful. It's a painful thing to see somebody, go in that direction. But I want to address.
Before you go there, I want to just say one thing about that. The same as with parenting. Let's say you see your child is doing something that you don't approve of. You can go very harshly and even get your way, but you win the battle, you may lose the war because you created all this resentment, and later the child grows up and remembers. I think it's vital that even if something's happening that we don't approve of, or worse, not to become judgmental and personally, because then you add more to the problem.
Right.
You have, as a person who deals with many situations, and I know the standards, a big challenge is how do you not personalize it? How do you not get angry? How do you not get upset? And how do you keep yourself So my answer always is one way. Think of what's beneficial for the situation. You know, if critique and judgment is going to just undermine and won't motivate anyone and create, then what have you gained? So you have to always think in terms of what's good for the cause, not what's good for you, or what's good for the cause, for the people involved, and not allow yourself. This is like same thing as a therapist has to somewhat remain detached from what they're hearing, because you can't. You want to be there, you want to be empathetic, but you also need to show some objectivity in order to help the situation.
So we're talking a lot about the symptoms, and I want to go back to the cause, which is actually what you started out with. So I think that there has to be a renewed push. You know, when I was growing up, it was like inconceivable, even as conservative, as reform as we were growing up, it was like inconceivable to marry somebody who wasn't Jewish. It was just like, we don't talk about that. We don't entertain that. That's not something that we do. Today, it's become a lot more acceptable, and the culture that we live in with the liberal ideologies that have crept in are, to say, really, it's actually racism 101. The idea to not marry somebody outside of your faith. That is the halachic definition of racism. We have a race, and we don't want to mix with another race. That is racism for all intents and purposes. I remember somebody very close to me, one of my best friends, I was speaking to his father one day. His son was just about to go marry somebody who's not Jewish, and I said to him, look, your son is going to marry this girl, and she's not Jewish. And he says, that sounds like racism to me. And I didn't have anything else to say. I said, yeah, it does. It does in a certain sense. I'm ready to accept that. I'm ready to accept it. It's fine.
But I don't. Just for the record, I don't agree with that.
By the way, you should know the non-Jews also hold by the same thing. If you ask, I'm pretty sure if you ask a Muslim mother who she prefers her son marry, a Muslim or a non-Muslim, she'd say a Muslim. A Christian would say a Christian. A Buddhist would say a Buddhist. An Asian would say an Asian. An Indian would say an Indian. An Italian would say an Italian. So everybody, but
I want to distinguish. They may be racist. Remember, I mentioned intentionally, I said it was a spiritual issue, not a racist issue. I'll tell you why. You don't marry your sister, not because you're a racist, because it's just, that's not how marriage works. So that's where I would not call it racism. I would call it more of certain things are meant to be married to each other and some are not. You can love a non-Jew deeply, like I just said, brother and sister. You don't marry your sister, not because you're a racist, just as an example.
So let's go back to Jewish education. We have to re-bring this narrative, even if it goes against popular culture.
But let me tell you, so let me say this. You know the statistic, a very interesting one. The cities in the world that have the highest rate of Jewish education for children have the lowest rate of intermarriage. I'll give you names. Toronto, Panama, Mexico City, and Baltimore, I think, a few others. The more Jewish identity, meaning children at young age are inculcated with a sense of Jewish identity, the less likely they will intermarry. It's not guaranteed, obviously, there's no such thing. But so there you have the root of the issue. It's all about education and infusing people with the spirit of what it means to be Jewish. If you don't feel anything unique, do you know how many Jews that are not intermarried? You ask them, what does it mean to be Jewish? They'll say, I don't really know. The most I know is I support Israel, and I don't like anti-Semitism.
And I like a bagel, lox, and cream cheese every now and then.
Yeah, so that's, even if they're married to a Jew, and maybe because they have the taboo or whatever the issue is, the family wouldn't approve. The key is knowing your own soul. Knowing your own soul. I will tell you another story, another case. There was a couple who were boyfriend, girlfriend, one Jewish, one not Jewish. I think she was not Jewish, he was Jewish. And their parents called me, and I said, let me meet with them. I met with them. Very fine people, nice people, open-minded. And I spoke to them about marriage. I said, let's talk about marriage. What's marriage? And we spoke about a spiritual union. So I encouraged them. I said, before you proceed with any marriage plans, why don't you read up on marriage? I gave them my book, Toward a Meaningful Life. I gave them some other books, suggested books. And they both came back and said, we never knew that marriage is a spiritual union of souls. and we're like very intrigued by what souls are like. You know what happened ultimately? They're very good friends today, but they're not married. He married a Jew, she married a non-Jew. They're friends because they came to understand what souls are, and they realized it's more than just whether I like you or I don't like you, whether we get along. It came down to what's our spiritual destiny? What does God want of us? Now, this is, of course, a happy ending. They don't always end that way, trust me. So I'm not suggesting I have any magic formula. In this case, it worked, but I saw proof of concept. What works is understanding your real identity. You know, I know we're not talking about this, but you think the gender issues and the blurring of boundaries today is not connected to this? It's also connected. People don't know who they are. You know, they don't realize that, for example, in the Kabbalah and Chassidus talks about a masculine energy, feminine energy. Most people don't even know what that means. They think it's some biological thing, and if I don't feel that way, maybe I'm not male. And I'm not here to criticize again. I'm just here to point out that we are lacking the ultimate what makes a human being. Who are you? You're a spiritual identity that God put in this world with a particular role to play. And that's that. It affects so many things, Berel. It doesn't just affect intermarriage. It affects roles.
Wow.
You know, what is my role in the world? If I'm not good at carpentry and I try to be a carpenter, it's not going to work. You have to find your unique calling, what God wants of you in this world. To me, that's really the heart of it all. It all starts from there.
So let's take a step forward, okay? Let's say we did our best, all right, to educate our children. Let's say we did our best to instill in them the values, marry a Jew, and all these things. And we have siblings, friends, family, children, God forbid, who start dating somebody outside of the faith, okay? And they're in a intimate relationship that is, they're dating. What should our response be? Because the knee-jerk reaction today, as I mentioned previously, and these are obviously in the less religious circles, is, yeah, who cares? Just get her to convert or get him to convert. So what is the ball? Let's say the ball's already in motion. How do we deal with that ball?
It's case by case. I always
I don't know what it's like in New York right now, but it's a nightmare in Montreal. I remember 15 years ago, the first guy who from a prominent Moroccan Jewish family. I remember that he decided he went to go marry this girl. She was a French Canadian lady, and he converted her, with some holy water, and that broke the dam. And today in Montreal, I don't know what the statistics are. I can only tell you what my feeling is. It's like 50%, which is huge for Montreal. Montreal is from the older style communities, the more old style community. And so Montreal to be at 50%, it's a mess. So I have friends right now that are dating non-Jewish people for years. What do you do at that point?
Well, there's that story they tell where a rabbi was approached by a family. They said, we have our children are dating non-Jews. What do you do? So he said, you came 20 years late. We should have talked about it 20 years ago. But we're talking after the fact. So firstly, as I was saying, it's case by case. I don't think there's a cookie cutter model and a recipe that will work for everybody. Because at the end of the day, as we both know, this isn't just a halachic question, a legal question. It's not just a spiritual question. There's emotions involved. When a man and woman are in love with each other, or they think they're in love with each other, you're dealing now with emotions that are clouding people's judgment.
Right.
So you can't just sit down, let's talk about it objectively. There's too many emotions involved. For the parents, for example, who are devastated by it, their emotions are involved. Their tendency may be, I'm cutting off. If you don't break up with her, don't come to me for money, I'm not coming to the wedding, and that's that. That's many people's knee-jerk reaction. Others have the reaction the other way. You know what? Not so bad. She's a lovely girl. He's a lovely guy. Things like that. So I think a wise wisdom requires taking everything into account. And number one, you have to be sensitive to the situation. You have to be human. You can't just come in with a battering ram and say the Torah says this is not forbidden, this is not allowed, it's forbidden, and that's that. What happens if they don't accept? They'll say, you know what, we're not Torah people. We're not religious. What do you say then? So you have to show care and empathy. That to me is always the rule. And you don't take, even though I'm a Jew, I'm not taking the Jewish side versus the non-Jew. I care about both of you. You're both human beings. God created you. So my approach would be is to try sensitively to educate them about, like I said earlier, what is marriage? What are souls? You know, you want to get married. Don't you want to build a beautiful family? Don't you want a future? One day you'll have grandchildren, great-grandchildren. You want to leave a legacy. So I try to use it as an opportunity to get them to think more seriously about it and not flippantly. Let's be honest. Marriage today is also in many ways almost like a technicality. How many people say, I don't need to get married. We live with each other and that's that. Now, frankly, that may be better than marriage if you're talking about intermarriage. But that's also because they don't understand the sanctity of marriage. So now, you'll say to me, does this work? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm being very straight with you. I have situations, I tried this, and it didn't work.
I'll also be straight with you. Is usually the people that care the most about the couple, the friends, the family, the siblings, the cousins. It's the hardest, that's the worst people to go talk to the couple because there's so much emotional charge around those conversations.
So that's a good point. They should find someone that's objectively outside of the emotional sphere. I agree totally. It's very bad. Parents, there's so many emotions involved because I've had a situation where the parents were trying to put pressure, and finally the guy said to them, you've always been pressured me in my life. You told me what school to go to. You always controlled me with money, and now you want to control who I marry. So it wasn't just the intermarriage part. It was also the complex dynamic between the child and the parent. So I agree totally. You have to try to get it into a more objective setting. That's for sure. So I don't have, I have to say, sadly, I don't have a formula that I can tell you guaranteed to work. We try our best, and we do our best. I know people that came to my classes, and they're intermarried, and they didn't have a conversion. And they're still friendly with me. They still come to my classes at times, and we speak, and they come to see me. I try to be nice because you never know where it's going to go. With parents and family, I will say this. Estrangement is not an option, in my opinion. Because at the end of the day, if you're the parent of, let's say, an intermarried couple, or intermarried couple who want to get married, at the end of the day, you're still their parent. You never know what's going to happen with their life. And let's say it falls apart and you are estranged from them, they don't even have you to come back to. So as angry as you may be, and as upset you may be, I'm from the believers, you have to stay in relationship. Obviously, they know where you stand. It's not like by being nice to them that you're suddenly endorsing it. But you are part of the family. So I would not tell brothers or sisters to cut off from their family members because life is complex. You know, the day will come, there may be a tragedy, there may be a sad event, there may be a loss. People get older, things change. You want to be able to say, you're still my brother, you're still my sister. Yeah, I don't agree with what you did, but I'll always love you. So I think that is a critical piece in the whole picture as well. So it's a delicate balance to balance, Berel. I'll be honest, because on one hand, you don't want to endorse it. On the other hand, you don't want to cut off entirely. So how do you manage that? Do you go to the wedding? Do you invite them for a Shabbat meal? And then your children see it, and then it sounds like you're validating it. So I'm not, you invite them for a Passover Seder. You see, it's a lot of complications. Let's put it this way. I told you when we began talking about this, I said it's not we're dealing with a Pandora's box that that opens up in so many directions.
I can only share what's helped in my situation. Is having a rabbi to guide you through all of these complexities is crucial.
Right.
And to not take those decisions on yourself because A, there's a lot of emotions involved, and B, you don't always know the correct things to do. So, you know, I've had friends that have, you know, been dating non-Jewish people, and I've had rabbis that have encouraged me. My rabbi encouraged me, invite them to your Shabbos table. Why? Because at least maybe the Jewish guy at the table with you will be able to see the beauty of your Shabbos table and say, I want this too. And he would have never have come had he not experienced, he would never have even considered Judaism had you not shown him that beauty. On the opposite end of it, I've had good friends that have married non-Jewish people, and my rabbi told me, look, you cannot go to that wedding. It's something that you cannot do. All these, so my suggestion to anybody out there, if you're dealing with this, is get a good, competent, good Jewish Orthodox rabbi that will help you through this. And in my humble opinion, Chabad is one of the best to deal with this. This is only my opinion. Everybody relax. Chabad is one of the best to deal with this. Why? Because they're on the front lines of dealing with these situations. The average Satmar, rabbi, I don't know how much they're dealing with this. The average Bells, the average, the other Hasidim, I don't know if they're dealing with this. Chabad is on the front lines day in and day out in every far-flung corner of the world dealing with this. Half of their Chabad house sometimes is married to a non-Jewish woman. I have a friend, I think he told me he's in the Philippines or Jamaica, whatever it was. He says half my Chabad house, they're married to non-Jewish people. I have to deal with this all day long. And there's a lot of complexities. So get a good rabbi that knows how to, that has experience in this domain.
I second that, absolutely.
Can you give us, Rabbi, some? I know that your schedule is extremely pressing, and I know you told me before that you had a lot of things on your plate today. Can you give us some closing thoughts on this subject?
In Judaism, we look at everything as a wake-up call. Even when things seem dire and the statistics don't look good, you said 50% in Montreal. I know there's cities, it's 80% intermarriage. And then there's how much of assimilation that doesn't translate into intermarriage, but it's potential intermarriage. So there's a lot to cry over. But as Jews, we always look in terms of what do we do about it? So in a way, it's a wake-up call, a real wake-up call, an urgent wake-up call, that our children perhaps are not getting the proper education that they should. Preemptive medicine. So the first thing that comes to mind, especially as we come to the new year, is it's critical to reconnect and recommit to a real passionate Jewish education, not just teaching our children mechanical Judaism, what to do, what not to do. But what does it mean to be Jewish? What did Abraham, our great patriarch Abraham, stand for? He was a pioneer that brought God to the world, as opposed to paganism, brought values, love, kindness instead of selfishness and self-interest. To learn to be proud of that Jewishness, and frankly, that message is for the entire world, a light unto nations. We're not isolating ourselves. We're essentially, be the ambassador of God that you should be as a Jew, that brings light to the entire world. The best defense is offense. Once you have to play defense around this, is very complex, as we've been discussing. So that's my real thought of how do we, the long term. The short term we discussed, what do you do after the fact? But long term, absolutely. Teach our children. We have a responsibility that we should never have to have this question on the table because they know what their role is. If you know what you have to do in life and you're comfortable with it, you're not going to be looking in the other pastures. And that's my a gut wrenching, whatever that's the word, knee jerk
reaction. And if I could
that's what I want. Yeah.
If I could add
my
mine
gut
to
reaction, that's what I meant. Yeah.
If I could add mine to it, it would be, I know that when I became religious, for example, the dating system, although it doesn't have, it's not perfect by any means, it's 1,000 times leaps and bounds ahead of when you're not religious. There's so many programs, so many websites, everybody's looking out for each other. There's matchmakers. It's a culture. It's built into the fabric of the religious Jewish culture. Is right. Helping people find their mate, and I think that I'm speaking me personally because I hate talking about what we have to do as a society because that never works. It always starts with what we do personally. I have to get better at trying to make matches for my Jewish friends and making suggestions for them to help them in this way of life. And something that I've been flirting with that God willing I'll do in the near future is a dating event right here in Panama. Have people come from all over the world, Jewish people, religious, not religious, who cares, come from all over the world and come here to date, to find a Jewish girl and or a Jewish boy, your Jewish husband, your Jewish wife. And I think that we have to, as a collectively, make it easier for people to find their mate because it's not easy. It's not easy. Rabbi, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. God bless. Keep up the incredible work that you're doing. If you want to see more of the rabbi's work, you could find him on YouTube. You could go to his website, meaningfullife.com. Phenomenal. Has books, has classes, has everything that you could want. Thank you so much for your time, Rabbi Jacobson. God bless and be well.
Thank you, and bless you and your audience. Beautiful to be with you.
Amen.